Good evening, and welcome to the pilot episode of Constructed Journey. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me is Ash Asa, and our guests for this week, uh, Sakanan, also known as Darthanos, the Jim Joe, and John Holio. Ash, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey there, guys. I'm Ash Asa. I've recently joined the Eternal Journey team. I've got a number of top 64 finishes under my belt. You might recognize my name from. I've just been playing Eternal for a couple of years now, and yeah, glad to be here.
And Saka?
Sure. I'm Sakarnan in game. I'm on Twitch as Darthnos. I've been playing Eternal on and off since open beta. And like Ash, I've got a couple of top 64s, only two of which in ECQs. But yeah, just excited about the game in general.
Lovely. Jim?
Yeah, I'm Jim Joe. I am actually one of the original members of the Team Eternal Journey, competitive team. I didn't really partake a whole lot initially. Had to take some time away from the game, but I just top 64 my first ECQ, so that was kind of cool. And I've been playing Eternal since I think the third set, pretty consistently, and it's got its claws in me pretty deep.
That's what we like. And John Holio?
Hey guys. Yeah, you guys might know me from the other Eternal Journey podcast. One of the hosts there with Jedi and Alex. And then got a few top 64s for competitive play. Recently did well in one of those challenge events, got top 16. And I've been on the team since we started it. And I'm probably one of our more prolific brewers. I just can't, some days I just can't help myself. I just can't stop, so.
And I am in game as Cal_Shadowstep. I have nothing to my name. I'm a filthy casual, just hoping to piggyback off of Jedi's success.
I wanted to correct that. You're a filthy casual.
There you go.
Would you just end this and just end it right now?
Podcast over. Jim Joe, you're out.
So, like I said, this is the pilot episode. Basically, obviously, the Eternal Journey podcast has a focus on limited play, and with a couple more constructed brewers and players joining our team, we thought it might be nice to try a more constructed focused podcast. So today we're going to be going over the recent ECQ. Like the other guys said, two of our guests top 64'd over the weekend. So they're going to talk about the preparation and stuff. We're going to try and do some metagame breakdown. We're going to have a look at some deck lists. So guys, you ready to go?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's get it.
Right, so we're going to start off with a spicy Eternal Warcry list of the week, which is the Ica Mandrake OTK by Sir Duckington. So I believe through the magic of editing, Ash will have the deck list on screen. So you know what, Ash, you found this list. You walk us through this list.
Right, cool. So yeah, we're going to try and bring a very novelty Eternal Warcry deck just to kind of spice things up a bit every week and get to the more fun brewing side of this game that we all love. And I think I found a pretty good one this week to kind of showcase. So obviously we're all familiar with the Merriest Mandrake, our favorite Christmas tree, I like to call it. Obviously I know it isn't, but it makes all your ultimate abilities cost half as much to use. Right, this is the most important part for this deck. And we're going to try and use that together with Ica Whirling Death to only pay 4 to give it a 5/5 Deep Forge plate with Endurance and Overwhelm. So this is trying to play like an OTK deck. It doesn't OTK in the sense that it truly one-turn kills, but you're trying to set up this big turn where you have set up your Spire Shadows from the market, making Ica a 1-cost 4/1, and then you're trying to set up this board state where you have a Merriest Mandrake in play. You know, you can play the Ica. You have obviously had it Spire Shadowed, and then you want to play a Frontier Jito from your market. So Frontier Gito is probably a card that has a lot of people scratching their heads like, what is this? Never heard of it. It is a 2-mana 1/1 for a red Oni that has charge itself, but the most important text on it is your units that cost 1 or less have charge. Obviously, after Spire Shadows, Ico will become a 1-mana 4/1, and thus it will get charge from this very spicy 2-drop. And that's kind of how you piece together this well, not truly a OTK, but it definitely swings for a lot of damage in one go and can definitely catch opponents by surprise. Yeah, just trying to smack your opponents upside the head with a charging, ultimated up Ico Whirling Death.
So what? She goes to a 4/1, and then becomes a 9/6. So she does 18 per attack. Yeah, for a cheeky 36 charge.
And she has Berserk. Yeah, that's it's a pretty sick. It won't always OTK, but yeah, it's a pretty sick way to get a lot of damage across the board.
I find the glimpse the possibilities in the market particularly spicy.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of a way to try and find, seeing as you've Spire Shadowed anyway, you're going to be casting things like a High Prophet of Soul and a Veteran Strategist and a Mary's Madrick. You'd be casting them for 0. So obviously getting your deck to have Warp will try and get you towards that Ica or whichever piece you need to complete the puzzle.
And post Spire Shadows, the Azindel is also a 0 cost. So yeah, just like you said, you get a churn through your deck trying to find your OTK.
Exactly. Yeah. I do have a couple question marks on the Dream Snatcher in this list. I feel like that probably could be maybe some more digging for answers, or maybe some more removal. Seeing as you are in Shadow, right? So you do get access to some pretty premium removal options.
The Dream Snatcher is clearly there to combo with the Mary's Mandrake. I've run Team Dream Snatcher Mandrake decks before, and Dream Snatcher is, even at 5 on the ultimate, is still expensive. I've actually swapped them with Mirror's Nightshade, because paying 2 to give your opponent Phobia a couple times in a game actually doesn't hurt too bad. And then you also get a 2-power 4/3, which gets to swing in pretty well. I understand why Veteran Strategist is in there, but I've always been like really off that card when trying to pair with Mandrake. I'd just rather be playing real cards. Not to poo-poo all over this deck. This deck is sweet. I don't want to be like a major grumpy Gus over here. Those are just the 2 flags that I'm looking at when I'm looking at the deck.
It's a free 1/4. What else can you ask for?
It is it is a free 1/4. And maybe I'm just not respecting Spires enough. That's totally possible. I haven't played much of Spire Shadows, so that could be where I'm just kind of off the reservation there.
Well, if anybody listening also hasn't played much Spire Shadows, and want an interesting deck, go and look at Sir Duckington's deck on Eternal Warcry. It's pretty spicy.
Yeah, and if there's a comment section, feel free to call me an idiot. Like that's totally fair. If I'm totally wrong, do it.
Do it, definitely do it.
I'm also not sure if everybody's aware, but recently, I forget the guy who runs Eternal Warcry. I'm sorry, Stever Cakes. There you go. Stever Cakes just added the ability to follow users. So if there's like Sir Duckington, for instance, so like let's say you really want to keep up to date on their brews, you can just hit the follow button under them, and I think you get notified whenever they post something else.
Ooh.
Awesome.
That's a very nice feature. Yeah.
All right, so the recent ECQ metagame breakdown, going through the top 64 lists. Ash, do you want to run through the top performing decks then for us?
Yeah, so we've got 4 obvious top runners in these ECQ results. So the top dog overall, coming in with 16 total representations in the ECQ, would be the red decks. These are decks primarily focused around the new Jack. Obviously, it's been a bit of a top dog in the format for a while now. We've actually got Skycrag aggro coming in as the top contender in this category with 13 showings. FTP is showing up as the second most represented deck obviously focused around Wampum Miso being strongly recognized as one of the better things you can do in Expedition nowadays. A couple decks have been running the Strangers, like Lin Rai Stranger, in the list, but just base FTP token Wampum Miso strategies have shown 10 times in this ECQ Top 64. Third most showings comes to the actual winner of the event, coming into the Shrine decks. So we've got a lot of different versions actually here in the Shrine decks. We've got some FTS versions, some Menace versions. But all of them are actually focused around the Shrine Carver combo, setting up these sacrifices. And then we have the obvious counter to these Shrine decks, coming with 9 showings, is the Roland decks. Also showing up in many different versions, mainly just splashing a third color alongside that Roland. Saka, maybe you could tell us a bit more about what these main 4 decks are trying to do and what the key cards are in these decks.
Sure. So, like, starting from the top with the Skycrag aggro decks, they just have very efficient threats in the early game, like basically as good as you can get for the power cost, and a really big inclusion to Skycrag over something like Stone Scarf is that they have the Silexes, which basically just allows you to consistently draw gas throughout the game. And having that over Vows is really good for fixing as well. It lets you play things like Kenna, whereas you normally couldn't. Like, it's really hard for Stone Scarf to run Boot, for instance. The Firetime Primal decks, most of them basically worked around with Mother of Skies and different multi-faction units that also generated some kind of advantage. The main one, obviously, is Wampum Miso. But some of these decks did include strangers in them, so you can do things like a Strange Gladiator, which helps buff your deck, and you also buff your hand, I'm sorry. And every time you play a multi-faction unit with Mother of Skies, you get a 1-2 into play. The Shrine Carver decks are pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you want to get a Shrine to carve it into play, and then you want to flood the board, usually with Mother and multi-faction units, but not necessarily the case. You just want to get a wide enough board, and then you want to start gaining enough life that you can just outrace the aggro decks. And the last deck here, the Roland Backbreaker decks, also pretty self-explanatory. You just want to play Roland. It's a very good card in mid-range mirrors. It also stops a lot of aggro decks. It's very tough for them to deal with. Some people did run Pillage, but I think it was only one person, so it's pretty tough for that deck to deal with it. And again, if you go the Corendon route, you can have 8 Silexes, which is obviously a very good thing to have.
Yeah, and obviously the Roland decks are very well positioned against the Shrine decks. That pretty much was, I think the consensus was that Shrine decks would be quite a big showing in this ECQ.
So, apart from those 4 frontrunners, the other couple of things which all were very light showings, there was a couple of mono black Xenon decks, there was some actual Strangers decks. We had a couple of Pyre decks. We had, I think, Kalebovich on mono time. Okay.
I think Kalebovich was on Backcrag aggro.
And then we have one Elysian version of Mother of Skies, which is probably not as good as FTP, and one Rakano, who doesn't accept that Friends in Low Places is dead.
Well, they made top 64,
Okay, I'm sufficiently burned. Well done. Where's your showing, Scrub?
They did it just to call you out. They heard that you were saying that Rakano was unplayable after the nerf. Now look at them.
Speaking of that, as our metagame breakdown, we'll move into what we're calling like ladder successes. Like what have you guys, John? What have you been succeeding with in ladder the past week?
Sure. So, like for Throne, I'll save it for a little bit later because we're gonna talk about kind of what I've been up to a little bit later. So I'll talk about what I've been doing in Expedition. I've mostly been playing two of the decks that we just mentioned, my versions of them anyway, a Roland Blackbreaker deck as well as a World Pyre deck. Basically, like if I'm running into a lot of control, or like a lot of other mid-range decks and a lot of other control decks, I bust out the World Pyre deck. And then when I start running into more aggro, I'll switch over to the mid-range Backbreaker deck because that seems to be like the favorable matchups for me.
Seems reasonable. Roland has been known to be good against aggro. Ash,
Yeah.
what about yourself?
Yeah, so prior to the ECQ happening, I was obviously testing a bit for the ECQ, which we'll get into a bit later. I was having quite a bit of success with my 4-faction shrine deck. Started out as a pretty sweet masterpiece with two non-overlapping merchants, being able to fetch every single card in the 5-card market, which was pretty sweet to put together. But yeah, it just focused on the interactions we talked about earlier with Carver and Shrine, just setting up the sacrifices, running the double displays, display of menace and the correct me here, display.
Destruction.
There we go. The display of destruction. Thank you. Combining those two for their pretty good sacrifice effects, and obviously getting to run the Mother of Skies in that list as well. Started off as a Vox deck, by the way, but yeah, didn't turn out to be good enough to bring to the ECQ. And yeah, after the ECQ, it was a bit of the Xenon Severin Pig combo, getting me into Masters. And that pretty much was it for me.
Very nice. Congratulations. Saka, how you been doing?
Sure. I've been doing pretty well. Like Ash, before the ECQ, I played. I was basically playtesting the Menace Shrine deck on ladder, but I also played a lot of Big Xenon, and like the main win con there was Katra or Severin, plus Carvet to get the surge triggers. And in Throne, I've been recently playing even Argentport, and if I ever feel like I'm playing against a lot of World Pyre or other different kinds of control decks, I'll usually just swap to an even a World Pyre list instead to try to go over them.
So what you're saying is the game is still paying for the sins of even-handed golem.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you see me on ladder, there's a pretty good chance that that's the case.
Most of the team have at some point been subject to one of my rants about even-handed golem.
Subject, I participated.
Jim, do you want to round out our ladder success portion?
Sure. Success being a loose term. I actually, prior to the ECQ, I was running a lot of Xenon. I don't brew. It's just not where my brain likes to be. I like to play decks and really just kind of know the ropes on them and maybe make some suggestions here and there, which I didn't do for the ECQ like I should have. Point being, before the ECQ, I was running Xenon mid range. I found that, or not I found, but the person who made it one of our, I believe it was M Sorbet, created this deck. And
Yes.
yeah, the combination of Vara's Choice plus Pesky Seedling into Ubsat to get there any leftover like Icarias or something was just a really potent combo at the beginning of this expedition format. Unfortunately, it transitioned to more like a multi-faction format, and Ubsat looks really, really bad right there. So I stopped playing that, and I swapped over to the deck that I played for the ECQ, which was the Fire Justice Shadow deck, which was almost a hybrid of Roland decks plus a little bit of Carver. So the Roland Backbreaker combo, or Roland Backbreaker is like a primary justice focused deck, and then it also had Carver and Shrine to try and make those Valkyries into 3/1 flying death touch lifelinking scary monsters. That was where the majority of my success came from. Afterwards, I'm running an updated version of the Fire Justice Shadow deck that's all in on the kind of real mid-range grindy aspect of that deck, using all 8 Silexes, a little bit more removal, takes out the Carvers in favor of things like Svetia and better top end, as well as the winning deck list from the ECQ was the Fire Time Shadow Carver deck. I've been swapping between those two decks, both decks that I'm comfortable playing, and I really enjoy the Carver one in particular.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not really going to talk a lot about mine because I've been having a horrible week in Expedition. I've had some success playing like Fell mid-range. I think there's a lot of Skycrag aggro on the top end of the ladder at the moment, and Blight Moth is just lines up very, very well against that. So sort of playing around with sort of the Lightning Storm, Turn to Seed, Blight Moth, sort of clears, and then finishing up with Champion and what's the ooze called? Primordial Plasma, the transform
Primordial.
one.
I think it's just called a primordial ooze, I believe.
Or plasma primordial, something like that.
It's called
Whatever
plasma.
transform
Plasma
is.
primordial. Plasma primordial is correct.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to our main topic for this episode, which is our guest preparation and experience for the ECQ. So, Jim, you want to tell us sort of how you prepared for this? You said you played Fire Just a Shadow Carver.
Yeah.
What-
So the deck itself was the creation of another one of the Team Eternal Journey members. I believe it was Plungno. I might be getting that name wrong. Might have been Msorbe as well. I apologize if I'm giving credit incorrectly. But basically it's a deck that kind of eschews removal and just says I'm gonna play Roland alongside Backbreaker as just a really good mid-rangey plan to try and deal with most any threats on the board. And then on top of that, I'm going to run Carver plus Blightmoth, and I believe one other kind of corruption unit to really try and and Kato, that's the one. To really try and get the benefit of the shrine combo. The idea being if our opponent plays around one, they fail to play around the other one, and I had some reasonable success with it. There were more than a few games where Shrine to Carver just totally stole the show with a reasonable talk deck, and then there were other games where Backbreaker came in, and it's really hard to deal with your opponent's 6 power, 12 defense weapon. So that was kind of the main focus that I had. It was the deck I was playing the most of the time. It's what I felt most comfortable with, and so that's what I ended up taking to the ECQ. Do you want me to go into like how the ECQ actually went and kind of how day 2 went and what my plans were there?
Yeah, well, what matchups did you struggle against? What things went well? What things went badly?
Gotcha. So the other Roland matchups were actually really solid because most of those mid-range matchups tended to have a fair amount of individual card removal, and my deck was reasonably resilient against that. Having a go wide strategy makes you generally more resilient against one-to-one removal. There wasn't a whole lot of board wipes running around, which was really nice because that was probably where my deck struggled the most, and that's where I most relied on Backbreaker. So other Roland matchups were pretty good. The Wump Mizo matchups were probably about 50-50. It really just depended on whether or not I had one of my ways of dealing with a turn 2 Wump, which usually meant I needed a turn 3 Siphoner Paladin to sacrifice one of my Blight Moths. If that happened, things went great. If it didn't happen, things went really, really bad because the 6/6 that Wump and Mizo turns into is just awful to deal with. And then my worst matchup by far was any of the red aggro matchups. It really just showed that trying to carve it either wasn't fast enough because I couldn't get my board wide enough because I'm trying to build a split between a go wide deck and a mid range deck, or they had Milo, which just ruins my deck. And unfortunately, my first deck, my one match in the top 64 was against Cows Go Moo, who was running Skycrag aggro. I was able to test with, I think, one of the members of Team Eternal Journey. I think it was John or Saka. I don't remember which one. And that matchup felt like it could go either way. I did end up losing it 2-1. I think there was one major mistake that I made in the third game that really cost me. Kazgamu also just played it really well. He didn't allow me to get much value off my Blight Moth. He didn't play every super fast aggro card he could on every turn. He held back a little bit, and I think that was the nail in the coffin for me. He just played it a little bit tighter than I did, made a few choice mistakes, and that kicked me out of the day 2.
Well, still, congratulations on a very solid showing. Speaking of top 64s and also Shrine to Carver, I believe Saka, you also took the Menace variation of Shrine.
Yeah, exactly. I took a Menace variation of Shrine. The way that I landed on this list was John Julio, IP Longno, and M Sorbet really helped a lot with the playtesting. We tried out a bunch of different decks. We started out, I think, with Xenon, played some Corendon stuff. I tried some Kooky Brews and stuff, but basically at the end of the day, we kind of thought that Shrine was like a really good tool to, beat out the aggro decks if you can, obviously you have to get it in time. And I really wanted to play Menace as opposed to Destruction just because Turn to Seed was a really good answer to Roland. And even in Shrine matchups, although they can sack the seed, it's really useful if you're able to hit like a Mother of Skies before they can get too wide, or a Strange Burglar. Um, yeah, as far as day one went, it went pretty well in general. The Sky Crag matchup felt pretty good. Um, the biggest issue for me was whenever they were able to resolve a Roland, and I didn't have a turn to seed, or if they were able to run removal for the Shrine of Carbon, because in the list that I brought, there were 8 merchants to grab the one shrine from the market. So if the opponent was able to interact with it, then it was usually lights out. I mean, the deck can still win. There's lines you can take, but losing shrine is a huge blow to the strategy. As far as day 2 went, my first matchup was against Newer Shadow, who I believe was also on Menace or on a Fire Time Shadow version. I don't 100% remember. Um, but the cool thing about their list is that they ran 4 shrines main, and they had a salvo market, which I thought was pretty neat. They had like a really teched out market for a lot of different answers, so it was pretty nice. The first game against them, it was a pretty close game, but he played it a little tighter than I did, and I ended up losing. And then in the second game, they basically had, you know, like the nut trot. They had the Carver on 1, the Mother on 2, the Kato stack on 3, and then Shrine. Yeah. But still, I mean, it was a good event. I had a fun time in it.
Were you playing the Edge of Uprising version?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So in the market, yeah, there was
Yeah.
an Edge of Uprising. There was a Junkyard, which which was pretty useful. I mean, if they were able to deal with the shrine early on, like you kind of have to go to your secondary game plan, which is uh try to make a big board and defend your relic weapon, in this case being the edge. And then once you reach your merchants later on, you can go for the junkyard to, you know, disrupt your opponent a little bit, get back the edge, and try to use that. Try to use the edge's effect to turn through more of your deck, to, you know, keep on generating advantage, try to remove your opponent's threats while chipping at them away with a 6/6 weapon.
Also, congratulations to you on a very, very solid showing.
Thank you.
Hopefully, I'll join you guys at some point.
I'm sure you'll make it.
Yeah, you'll get there.
I mean, to be fair, we had the same score in the last ECQ. I think you just lost on the tiebreakers, right? I'm pretty sure. You went
Yeah,
18.
I think I played too early. I think it was my mistake because obviously my time zone is a bit weird, so I sort of played when I was able to, and then yeah, ended up 66 on tiebreakers.
Yeah, I barely got it on tiebreakers. I think I was like 59th.
Yeah, I definitely get your struggles though, Saka. You were saying about the like if any Roland gets resolved against you, you were running turn to seed if I heard correctly, which was yeah. So I brought the 4th action shrine deck that I was talking about in the that brought me quite a bit of success on ladder, and yeah, it definitely was a case in day one of if you just face too many Roland decks, you're just gonna luck out eventually.
It's just really rough because, you know, to get to your answers, because I think you ran 2 open contracts in the deck. Uh, like to get to your answer, you know, you have to sack either to the burglar or to the carver, and every time you do that, you know, the Roland bomb just keeps ticking up.
There was only really one counter I found to that. Like, obviously, assuming you don't have the like, I ran 2 open contracts as you said, main deck to deal with it, and I had a Felrock's choice in the no, was it Felrock's? No, the other Rindra's choice.
Rindra's choice.
Choice in the market to deal with the multicolor unit. And so I did have some answers to the Roland, but I found that very often I had to try and kind of leverage sacking my units and then playing a Blight Moth to kind of deal with the 1/1 deadlies. But then I came in a position where you could only ever attack with the Blight Moth or the Mother of Skies units that I was creating. You know, the whole ground combat is just completely shut off by this singular Roland. It was just really hard to deal with.
I think it's generally quite interesting though that like I think as a team we kind of mostly got to Shrine itself pretty early, and then tried like a load of variants of that in particular. And like obviously, the guys that played, I think most of us took different versions of Shrine.
I actually went World Pyre just because I was expecting more backbreakers, from what I was seeing. But
Was it Willpower Shrine though? And if it's not, then why was
no,
It was.
it was not. The deck we're going to talk about later is a Shrine deck, though.
it?
It could not be further from World Fire Shrine.
Yeah, I think as you said, like as a team, we kind of landed on Shrine pretty early because I think there was kind of the main consensus that aggro was really, it was aggro and World Pyre. I think was the two big things that were being explored, and Shrine kind of just gets underneath the World Pyre, where once you get a World Pyre out, you're looking to set up a couple turns and play some big spells like Aid of the Huru and stuff like that. But Shrine just kind of gets underneath that and just destroys your whole game plan. And against aggro, the life gain is just too much to deal with. So I think a lot of people were trying to find the best build of Shrine. And as you said, we, as a team, I think we took like 3 different versions of Shrine where, there was the kind of tech to notice that Roland was the counter to Shrine decks. So expecting a lot of Roland decks, expecting a lot of Shrine decks, you can kind of incorporate that Roland into your own Shrine deck. So we get to the list of incorporating both the Roland mid-range strategy with the Backbreaker and the Shrine strategies. And then you've got the Menace strategies with the Mother of Skies producing a lot of sacking tokens. And yeah, for me personally, it was the 4-faction Shrine decks where, you kind of, you're standing in front of a big choice, choosing whether you want to go Menace Shrine or Destruction Shrine, because blue adds a lot of token creating opportunities in Mother of Skies and like the Revenge spell that makes 2/1/2 beasts mobilization.
And Edge.
And of course the Edge is a big weapon in that deck. But Destruction gives you access to so much, it gives you access to the big thing is Eramot's Machinations was one of the big things for me, and the display of Destruction obviously being very solid. So yeah, I personally decided to go with the 4-faction Shrine deck. Yeah, I think as a team we kind of landed on Shrine being the good way to combat the current meta and just needing that answer for Roland to push Shrine through to the win, really.
I was thinking about how the deck could have been improved and what I was really missing out on. And as I look at my market, I had 2 cards in my market that I really don't think really got there. One was Mysterious Waystone. I love the card, but I think that even in a dedicated sack deck, I've had trouble justifying it. Both because it just takes a while to ramp up, even if you only need maybe 3 to 5 sacks to really get it going. And secondarily, Face Aegis is just everywhere with the primal power that gives you Aegis. I forget the name of that card, and then the market card as well, giving them Face Aegis as well. It's really hard to get a Mysterious Waystone through. And secondarily, Burglarize falls into the same category. My thought was that Burglarize would have been great tech against other Shrine decks because I could steal their shrines. I did manage to do it once, and I did win that game, but ultimately paying to steal your opponent's to not affect the board really, but steal their relic just wasn't really getting there. And the Nightfall from the card also kind of feels like you're not really getting that card advantage you really want. I really missed Slime Spitter Slug. I wish I had one of those in my market. It would have helped me a lot against Mom decks because all of their flyers would just die, and then Roland decks because that's another answer to the 1/1 Valkyries while also getting a gigantic slug.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know Slime Slug was in the format.
I didn't either until like my 26th game, and it was played against me, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna just lose to that.
Yeah, I think a main thing, like for me personally as well, like I was talking about having open contract and Rindra's Choice, to deal with the actual Roland itself. I think maybe that was the wrong way to combat Roland. Like I think for sure you want some removal for the actual Roland in your deck, but as you say, the Slime Spitter Slug also dealing with the 1/1s. My personal experience being the Blight Moths, holding them in hand until you can destroy a couple of the deadly 1/1s. I think that might be the primary way to combat the Roland, especially in the Menace version of the deck where you have Mother of Skies to create a lot of flying threats, you know. So I think that might have been a little misjudgment, especially on my part, you know, whether how to combat that Roland strategy.
Any consideration to playing FTP from any of you guys, or are you just not on the deck?
It's not one I had a chance to really test or anything. I just, it was like I just you only have so many resources, right? And you have to craft so much stuff when a new set comes out. So it's just like I had like the least cards from kind of what I think that deck wanted. So I just didn't really get to explore that one personally.
Yeah, I honestly thought the deck was going to be gone for pretty easily. There was a lot of people running Suffocate, which does really well against turn 2 Wumps and Moms. So it didn't feel like the right choice for me. I could play it, but I think I just enjoy decks that try to sack for value better. So long as Shrine's in the format, I'm playing decks that sack for value.
I was basically in the same seat as Jim Joe. I think FTP it's a pretty good list. Yeah, people were running Suffocate, so the one is a little easier to interact with. But honestly, the main reason why I didn't play it was just because I Jund is one of my favorite colors in Magic for EDH decks. So like I'm all about sacrificing triggers, death triggers, all that kind of stuff. And Shrine seemed like it was pretty well positioned. I do think that FTP was like a really good call, though. You've got a lot of good threats. You have inevitability, you have card advantage. It was a good deck.
I think the main problem with the deck is the fact that Wump and Mizo was already established to be one of the better things to do, right, in Expedition deck, or at least like if you're going to play a multicolor deck, you're either playing Shrine or Wump and Mizo, or Roland, of course, but I think Wump and Mizo was one of the things that a lot of people already kind of teched against. So for me, it was kind of a question of like I'd rather combat the Wump and Mizo because I think a lot of people are on Wump and Mizo, so I don't think the mirror match is. I think it's kind of a coin flip, really. So I think that was my reason not to be on that deck.
Very reasonable. Let's move on to the final segment, which we're calling WTF is John doing this week? John, what deck do you have for us this week?
So yeah, what I've been doing this week, I've been mostly Bring for Throne actually, which this is actually going to be an expedition deck, but just to tease like maybe some future stuff, I'm updating my Spellcrag. I've also figured out a way to make the card Shared Vision not just good but great. So I'm really excited about that. But that's still kind of a work in process and is a discussion for another time. This week I'm going to share an expedition deck that it was one of the ones I had in contention for the ECQ. Right, we talked a bunch about Shrine decks earlier, and like Kilo's performed in ECQs before, so that was already kind of on the radar. But I think everyone knows the inherent weaknesses with a Kilo deck, and we've mentioned Turn to Seed, and that's a big one, right? So ultimately, I decided not to run this. It's also weak to Roland, right? Like we talked about all those strengths and weaknesses earlier, and so I just decided it wasn't great for the tournament. But I mean, I'd say anyone could play this on ladder, and you may not win, a million games, or but I think you can easily get at least 50%, right? Like I don't think this is like a bad deck or anything, even though it may look like just a huge meme. So I call this one Holio Kilo Spire flowchart spreadsheet. There's a spreadsheet for this one to help you kind of navigate the deck because it's really complicated. But I put flowchart in the name because I saw Yottabyte and some other people, I think Kaz, playing a similar deck in a previous expedition where it's just so complicated they needed a visual aid, and so I'm just a little less artistic. So mine's a spreadsheet. I'm in accounting. What do you want from me? So the whole point of this deck is, at its heart, it's a Kilo deck, which means it's like a toolbox deck. So there's just a ton of one-ofs. I don't think you guys want me to go through like the entire deck list or anything, right? Just have our listeners pull up the list to see the specifics. Just talk about it in broad strokes.
I'm gonna have the list in the background for you. Don't worry.
Sure. So yeah, I'm not going to go card by card, but I'll just because there's a lot of them, more than your average deck. But the basic game plan is to survive, right, until you can deploy Kilo and start doing exactly what you want to win that game based on what your opponent's doing. So obviously we can only have 4 of Kilos, but in this case I'm also running 2 learned imitators to basically be 2 additional copies of Kilo. It doesn't matter, whether you draw her early or not. So like I've tested the deck with more like 8, and I brought it down to 6. Like I think every game you'll eventually get to a Kilo with 6. It feels like a good number, but feel free to adjust this. In fact, feel free to basically adjust anything with all these one ofs. All you have to do is tinker with the spreadsheet if you do. So just keep that in mind. But we're running basically just every card you want to answer anything or proactively do things to help you win the game. And then like if things just go horribly wrong, there's also at the very top we have one Macdo who once you've drained all your opponent's resources and you drop this guy, you basically can't lose the game. I mean, obviously they'll eventually draw an answer for him, but we're also luckily a shrine deck. So early game, you obviously influence is a big issue with a 5-color deck, and this one is a 5-color deck that wants literally like 3 of everything and 5 of primal. You don't need like all of that right away, obviously, and how you approach your power every game depends on your starting hand, your draws. But a lot of times you want to prioritize being able to play a Blight Moth so that you don't just die. And a lot of times you'll want to prioritize being able to cast one of your East NX smugglers in games versus anyone applying pressure like Mono Fire aggro or like Skycrack aggro, things like that. And in those cases, you'll want to you'll want to hold back on deploying even your dork units other than like unfamiliar interlopers and things to help you set up, and just go for the board wipe from the market, the Shenra Speaks. That way you can just stabilize and then deploy and do Kilo stuff. Sometimes if your opponent's going wide with tokens, you can Kilo your way up to a Black Sky Harbinger. If they're just kind of dirtling, you can just prioritize getting that shrine going and just smash them. Just act like you're any other shrine deck, right? Just go a little wide and just kill them out of nowhere. Another juicy thing this deck does is it runs Spire in the market. So in most games where your opponent's not applying an extreme amount of pressure, you just want to go immediately for the Spire, cast that as soon as you can, and then at that point, most things in the deck like shift down in cost significantly. Some things even cost 0, like Shelterwing Rider after you cast a Spire is ridiculous. It comes down as like a 9/4 Aegis like flyer, for example. And just like, I mean, it's crazy. Like you can basically play it out every game to work towards the exact unit you have in the deck and that you need to just counter the opponent's strategy and then work your way towards a victory. Like this is like such a fun deck to play, and you can come back from and win games that it seems like you just have no business winning. And it just looks like a hot mess, but it's actually consistent and wins games. So I don't know what else really to say about it. You just need to play, just get some reps in and kind of figure out some of the lines. Like it's a really complicated one. Just the thing the spreadsheet is mostly for, right, is when you're playing an opponent, you're like, wow, I really need X card. You can look to that and see like how exactly and how most quickly you can get there by kiloing is basically what that part is for. But yeah, I think I laid out the basic strategy of the deck. There's also just a one of Wasteland Broker, and that is mostly for later in the game. You might, in some grinding matchup, maybe in a mirror match versus another shrine deck, you could put 4 Aeromott's Machinations in your deck. And after you've done Spire stuff and sacked stuff, like you've got a million units that causes 1, 2, and 3 in your void. So those machinations just really pop off. And you'll occasionally in certain matchups put 4 swirls in your deck. And I think you'll know what those matchups are. But like, for the most part, not the Shenra Speaks, not the Shrines, not the Spire. Like that's what all the smugglers are for. I think we're running 7 smugglers, so that we have access to that Spire basically every game, and the Shrine. But yeah, I don't think I've played. I don't think I've played out any 2 games with this deck even remotely like similarly, other than like early game set up the the mana base, all the a ton of influence you need, and then like just trying not to die like that. That part of it, the strategy is the same. But another card that really pops off in this deck is where is he at? Roland, right? You'll know as soon as you play with them what I'm talking about. And then there's also at the very top next to Mokto one of Shimmer Pack. So like that's for like a board state where you never managed to deploy or like didn't draw a smuggler or kilo into a smuggler to get the shrine out, but you have a nice wide board, and like you've got your Shimmer Pack in hand, and it only costs 4 anyway, and boom, Shimmer Pack. So it's like it's also Shimmer Pack deck. So what do we got? It's a kilo deck. It's a recursion deck. It's a Shimmer Pack deck. It's a Shrine deck. It's a Spire Shadows deck. It's just a fun deck. So that's what I've been up to.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, John. I know when we were talking about Shrine decks for the ECQ, John pops up and he's like, "This is what I'm going to look." We were looking like when we said Shrine decks, John.
I already had a Shrine deck even before like all the changes to the format. I had a really good Shrine deck already going, so I was like, that box was already checked, so I could have some fun, and experiment more.
Only John says, what does Shrine of Karvet need? Shimmer Pack.
No. You're missing the real MVP here, right? Island's Frost Rider.
I was looking at that.
That is where it's at, man. I love that. Just random stun 2 enemy units, right? Oh.
It's not even just about that, right? Like each unit in this deck is carefully curated, not just for the effect, but to like be able to, tutor perfectly, right? Yeah. Like I didn't just throw a bunch of units that, have a summon effect, right? Like that Frost Rider, like gets you to Vara, right? Or once it's flipped, I think it gets you to the Mokto. Like I can't remember without literally looking at the flowchart or the spreadsheet, but like everything's in here for an exact reason, right? And like you have to like climb the ladder, the kilo ladder, very carefully.
Yeah, there's what I should have on screen. There should be 2 halves of that spreadsheet: pre-Spire Shadows and a post-Spire Shadows set.
Yeah. It's there. It takes a while, but this is a hell of a list.
Yeah, and you got to be a little, there's all these little caveats, right? Like for the most part, all those rules are laid out, but I listed a few caveats on both tabs. But like depending on the timing of when you cast that Spire Shadows, there's 3 from cards in the deck, and like those will either be their stats and cost will be flipped or not, depending on what influence you had when you cast that Spire Shadow. So that is one like random thing to be aware of. And another thing I guess I didn't mention with the Learned Imitator is some games like you've already got your kilo in play, and you can go ahead and turn that Learned Imitator. Usually the other thing that obviously none of these summon effects work for that, so that's not what it's for. It's either for additional kilos or the from below transmute card, the Plasma Primordial. That is an excellent thing for that thing to be. It's a 0/8, but every turn it makes a 3/1 killer, and it also has the ongoing effect where your opponents will have to discard every copy of spells they try to cast from their deck. So that happens in games too.
Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap it up there. So this has been the Constructed Journey podcast. Me and Ash have been hosting with your guests Sakanan, John Julio, and Jim Joe. I'd like to give a shout out to, well, for one, to Jedi for letting us piggyback off his podcast. but also to like the rest of the Eternal Journey team and the community. They're all great people. Does anybody else have anything they want to say?
No, Jedi is indeed the man, and y'all are indeed good peeps. Here, here.
If we see each other on ladder, please don't play Royal Decree or Trinket Seed against me.
Or else no friend requests.
If you no, if you play, I'm actually in the same boat. If I see Turn to Frog, Royal Decree, and Turn to Seed all on the same deck, you will get a friend request from me. It will not be a nice
Uh-oh.
one. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that. But God, I've played against that deck, and I don't lose to it often, but it takes forever, and I'm unhappy the whole time.
Nah, I think you covered it, Cal. It's like, yeah, I'm sure we'll get some more people from the Eternal Journey team on
Yeah, and like
TSS.
wherever you guys hear this, if there's anything you want us to talk about, if there's anything you want to comment on, you can find us at the Eternal Journey Discord. Other than that, yeah, I guess have a good evening.